The garden thief Elias lived alone in a quiet human settlement on the edge of Colony Delta. He was old, slow-moving, and known for two things: his silence and his mango garden. The mango tree stood tall and golden behind a small wooden fence. Glowing under the alien sky, he had spent 10 years growing them. The only real mango trees on this strange planet. To Elias, they were more than fruit, they were memory. Peace and home one morning, as the twin suns rose, Elias noticed something strange. 3 ripe mangoes were missing from the tree near the fence. At first he thought maybe animals took them, but the bite marks were clean, not from teeth, but small hands. He frowned, his eyes scanning the dry soil, their small footprints, lighter than a child's. They led to the edge of the forest, then vanished. Elias didn't tell anyone. He simply repaired a loose plank in the fence and waited. That night, he sat on his porch with an old flashlight in one hand and a hot cup of tea in the other. Garden was silent. Only the chirps of distant alien birds broke the stillness. Hours passed, and just when his eyes started to close, he heard it, a soft rustling, followed by a faint grunt. Someone was inside the fence. Elias moved slowly, quietly, his flashlight pointed at the trees. There beneath the biggest tree was a small figure, not human, not completely. It was a girl, maybe 10 or 11 by human standards. She had glowing violet eyes, silver skin, and wore a torn cloth wrapped around her like a dress. Her fingers gripped a mango tightly, as if it were gold. When the light hit her face, she froze. So did Elias. "Drop it," he said gently. The girl didn't move. She looked scared, like a wild animal cornered, but she didn't run. Instead, she slowly raised the mango to her lips and took a bite. Juice ran down her chin. Her eyes filled with tears, not from fear, but hunger, real hunger. Elias lowered his flashlight. He stepped closer, his voice softer. "Are you alone?" She nodded, not speaking. He pointed to the shed at the corner of his garden. "Go there," he said. "I won't hurt you." The girl hesitated, then walked slowly to the shed and disappeared inside. Elias stood in silence for a long moment. Then he turned and went inside his house. That night, he didn't sleep much. The next morning, he brought a plate of food to the shed. Inside, the girl sat curled in the corner, holding the mango pit like it was a treasure. She looked at the food, then at Elias. He placed it near her and stepped back. Minutes passed before she touched it. When she did, she devoured the meal like she hadn't eaten in days. "What's your name?" Elias asked. The girl chewed slower now, her voice small and broken. "Where's your family?" "Gone," she whispered. Elias didn't ask more. He just nodded and left her alone. For the next 3 nights, Riva came out only. After sunset, she stayed near the shed, never crossed the garden again. Each morning, Elias left her food, and each evening, he found the plate empty. She was careful, quiet, never made a mess, but always watched him from afar, like a shadow. In the trees, the neighbors started asking questions. "Elias, you look tired," they'd say. "Anything wrong?" He smiled and shook his head. "No, just old bones." He'd reply. One evening, he found Riva standing near the mango tree again. Not stealing, just looking. She touched a branch gently, then looked at Elias. "Why don't you stop me?" she asked. Elias shrugged. "You're not a thief if you're hungry." She blinked, surprised by his answer. "Others chase me." "I'm not others," Elias said, and sat beside the tree. He offered her a mango, this time without hiding. Riva took it slowly, like she didn't trust the kindness. But she sat down too, and they ate together in silence. That night, Elias didn't feel old. He didn't feel alone either. He looked up at the stars, wondering what kind of world would leave a child like her to starve, and why his garden, his quiet life, had been chosen for this strange meeting. Maybe the trees knew. Maybe they whispered through their roots. Either way, something had changed. It all began with a stolen mango. The stranger in the shed. Rain fell hard on the metal roof of the garden shed that night. Lightning cracked the sky, and the wind howled through the mango trees. Elias stood at his window, staring toward the Shed, he hadn't seen Riva all day. He left her food like always. But it remained untouched. Something was wrong, very wrong, without thinking. Elias grabbed a lantern and his old coat. He rushed into the storm, stepping carefully through the soaked earth. The shed door creaked open slowly under his hand, inside. It was dark, cold, and empty. Riva was gone. A chill ran through Elias, but not from the rain. He scanned the floor, their small footprints, and next to them, a smear of green blood. Alien blood. She was hurt. His heart pounded like it hadn't in years. She was just a child, and he had let her out of his sight. Suddenly, he heard a cough, faint and weak. He turned quickly toward the back wall. A pile of old blankets moved. He rushed over and pulled them aside. Riva lay there, shivering, soaked, and bleeding from a cut on her leg. She looked up, eyes wide with fear. "They're coming," she whispered. Elias knelt beside her, confused. "Who?" Riva grabbed his sleeve. "The ones who made me." Elias didn't understand at first. He helped her sit up, checked the wound, and wrapped it with a clean cloth. As he worked, she told him a story that made his hands tremble. She hadn't been born the way most children were. She was part of an experiment, one of many. Her creators were scientists, human and alien, working in secret. When the project failed, they destroyed everything. Or thought they did. But Riva escaped. She had lived on the run ever since, sleeping in forests, hiding in drains, surviving on stolen food, and now, somehow, they had found her again. "They track by scent," she said. "They won't stop." Elias stood up slowly, mind racing. He had no weapons, no way to fight, just an old hover cart, a dusty plasma cutter, and a heart that refused to let her die. He couldn't give her back, not to people who treated her like a failed project. She was not a mistake, she was a child, and she was his guest. "I have to move you," he said. Riva shook her head. "They'll find me anywhere." "Let them come," Elias said. "They'll have to go through me." Later that night, Elias dragged an old bed into the shed. He covered Riva with warm blankets and made soup from what little he had. He didn't sleep. He sat beside her all night, listening to the storm fade into silence. The next day, they would plan. But that night, Elias made a silent promise. Whatever she was, whatever trouble followed her, she wouldn't face it alone anymore. In the dark, Riva whispered, "Why are you helping me?" Elias stared into the blackness. "Because someone should have long ago." And with that, something shifted again, not in the sky, not in the soil, but in the space between two broken souls, one old and tired, the other young and hunted. A bond was growing, not by blood, but by kindness. And it had started not with a question, but with shelter, in a broken shed, on a broken world, where a stranger had chosen not to look away. Riva's secret, * 3 nights passed without warning. The stars above Elias's farm seemed dimmer. The air had changed colder, heavier, like the sky itself was holding its breath. Riva hadn't spoken much since the storm. She helped Elias feed the soil, carry water, and pick the last ripe mangoes, but her eyes were always scanning the sky, the trees, the shadows. She was waiting for something, or someone. Elias noticed her silence. He had seen it before, in soldiers who returned from battle, in children who had lost too much too soon. One evening, while they shared a quiet meal beneath the trees, he gently placed a warm mango in her hands and asked, "What aren't you telling me?" Riva didn't answer right away. She looked at the fruit, then at the sky, then finally at Elias. "You know, I wasn't born like others," she said. Elias nodded slowly. "You said you were made." Riva hesitated, then reached into the folds of her cloth dress. She pulled out a tiny black object, smooth, flat, and glowing faintly blue, a memory chip. "This has everything," she whispered. "About what they did to me." Elias took it carefully, examining the strange alien material. "It's encrypted," she added. "Only certain systems can read it." Elias looked up, confused. "Why give this to me?" "Because I trust you," she said, "and because if something happens to me, Someone should know. Elias sat in silence, the weight of the chip heavy in his hands. He had expected hunger, fear, maybe even sickness, but not this. This was evidence, a secret buried deep under layers of lies. He stood and placed the chip in a metal box near the shed, then locked it away. Later that night, Riva woke him with a whisper. "There's something else," she said. "Something about me." They sat on the porch, under the stars. Riva pulled her sleeves up, revealing faint lines along her arms. Not scar seams, artificial seams, almost invisible, like they had been made by machines. "My body heals faster than normal," she said. "I don't get sick like humans." Elias leaned forward, surprised. "You're enhanced," Riva nodded. "I was supposed to be a prototype." "For what?" he asked. "For soldiers." The words dropped like stones between them. Soldiers. They had made a child, a girl, for war. And when she wasn't perfect, they threw her away. Elias stood and paced the porch. "This isn't right," he said. "They'll keep doing this to others." "They already have," Riva replied. "Hundreds like me, some older, some younger. They're all gone now." Elias clenched his fists. The old anger in his heart woke up again, the same fire he felt long ago when he watched people suffer while others profited. "You said this chip has proof," he said. "Yes," Riva answered. "Names, locations, research notes. If I could send it to the right place, maybe someone would stop them." Elias looked toward the hills beyond the forest. A thought struck him. An old rebel satellite tower stood abandoned on the cliffs left behind after the human war. Ended, it was broken, rusted, but maybe, just maybe, still strong enough to transmit. "Tomorrow we go to the tower," he said firmly. "It's time the world knew what they've done." Riva looked up at him, uncertain. "You could be punished." "I've been punished by silence my whole life," Elias replied. "I'd rather speak once and be heard than stay quiet forever." And in that moment, their path changed again, no longer just survival, now it was justice. They went inside, closed the door. Outside, the wind picked up, in the shadows far beyond the garden, small blinking lights moved through the trees. The ones who built Riva were coming, but this time, the girl was not alone. This time, she had someone who would fight beside her. Escape and fire, asterisk. The night air stank of smoke, not from a fire Elias started, but from one meant to erase everything. He had woken to the sound of silence. No birds, no wind, not even the buzzing of insects. Just a stillness that felt wrong, dead wrong. Then came the heat. Not from the morning sun, but from the crackle of flames licking the edges of his garden. He ran outside barefoot, shouting. His mango trees, his shed, his porch, everything was burning. But it wasn't wildfire, it was controlled, targeted. And coming from the sky, above, 3 black drones hovered, silent as death, their red lights flashing like warning eyes. Elias grabbed the plasma cutter from the shed's wall. He rushed inside the smoking structure and shouted, "Riva!" But she wasn't there. For a moment, his heart sank. Then he heard banging from beneath the floorboards. He pulled them up and found her curled in a small hiding pit, coughing from the smoke. "We have to go," he said, lifting her. "They found us." Riva's face was pale, but her eyes sharp. "They're not here to capture," she whispered. "They're here to erase me." Elias didn't hesitate. He loaded her into the old hover cart, powered by a half-charged cell and nothing else. He threw a blanket over her and sped away from the burning home. Behind them, the mango trees cracked and fell in showers of ash. The garden was no more. The cart rattled and groaned as it crossed uneven terrain. Elias turned onto the rocky path toward the southern cliffs. The rebel satellite tower lay hidden in that direction, forgotten by most, except by old men with memories and alien girls with secrets. Riva sat beside him, shaking. "They never leave survivors," she said softly. "Whoever they send, they don't stop." Elias kept his eyes on the horizon. "Then we won't stop either," he said. "They burned my home, and I still didn't run fast enough." They rode for hours through dead lands, no trees, no buildings, just dry red earth and broken machines from an old war. Once, Elias saw a drone in the sky. He shut off the cart's engine and covered Riva with heat-dampening cloth. They stayed motionless for 30 minutes. When the drone passed, he restarted the engine and drove on. Finally, as the suns began to set, they reached the edge of the cliffs. There, half buried in dust and vines, stood the remains of the transmission tower. Metal ribs stuck out like the bones of a giant. Its dish was cracked, its frame rusted, but its signal port still blinked faintly blue like the chip Riva carried. They climbed the hill slowly. Elias helped Riva up the final slope, and together they entered the control chamber. Dust coated every surface, but when Riva inserted the chip, the screen blinked to life. Old codes danced across it. "I can open a channel," she said, fingers moving fast, "to the old rebel servers, encrypted." Elias heard a distant sound, high-pitched, fast, getting louder. "They're coming," he warned. Riva nodded without looking up. "I just need 2 more minutes." Outside, the drones returned. 3 at first, then 5, then 10. Their red lights cut through the twilight, surrounding the tower. Elias gripped the plasma cutter tightly, his old hands trembling but ready. He took position by the door. "You finish the upload," he told Riva. "I'll handle the rest." The first drone fired a warning shot, blasting a hole in the cliffside. Elias responded with a single blast, direct and perfect, hitting one of them square. It fell in smoke and sparks. The others fired back. Stone and fire rained down. Elias shouted, "Riva now!" She screamed, uploaded, and pulled the chip free. A final screen appeared on the monitor. Signal received. Data secured. Elias grabbed her arm, and they ran down the backside of the cliff. The ground shook behind them as the drones fired again, this time destroying the tower completely. But it was too late. The truth was already out. Riva's past, the program, the names, the research, all exposed, broadcasted across rebel servers, reaching colonies beyond the planet. At the bottom of the hill, Elias and Riva collapsed behind a fallen crawler. Both were bruised, coughing, covered in dirt and ash, but alive. Riva looked at him and said, "They'll come harder now." Elias nodded, blood on his lip. "So will the people who care." That night they didn't rest, but somewhere far away, on planets they had never seen, others were waking up to the truth, and someone had finally listened. It cost Elias everything, his home, his peace, his trees, but as he held Riva close under the stars, he knew something had been planted in their place, not roots this time, but revolution. The memory chip, asterisk. They didn't speak much the next morning. Their bodies ached, clothes torn, and the cliffside smelled of smoke and melted metal. But the sky was clear for the first time in days. It was quiet, not peaceful, but the kind of quiet that comes after something terrible. Like the world was waiting to see what would happen next. Elias sat on a rock, staring at the tiny black chip in his hand. It looked so simple, so small, but it had destroyed his home, and now it had the power to destroy much more. Riva sat beside him, her knees pulled to her chest. She hadn't slept. Every sound made her flinch. Every breeze felt like danger. The broadcast had gone out, but that didn't mean they were safe. "The chip?" Elias asked softly. "Is it the only one?" Riva shook her head. "There were more." She pulled out a second chip from under her dress, thinner and colder. "This one wasn't for them," she said. "It was for me." Elias turned to her, confused. "What do you mean?" Riva took a deep breath. "They recorded everything. My movements, my brain waves, my thoughts. If I failed, they were going to erase me and build a better version. This chip holds every moment of my life, what I am, and what they hoped I'd become." Elias stared at the second chip. It wasn't just evidence. It was Riva herself. Everything she had been, and everything they tried to force her to be. "Why keep it?" he asked. She looked down. "So I wouldn't forget I'm real." They hid in the ruins of an old cargo pod for the day. Elias worked to boost a signal from a broken emergency beacon, not to call the authorities, but to reach the rebel colonies that still believed in truth. When night came, a voice finally crackled through the speaker. "You've sent fire through the net," said the woman on the other end. "Every channel is talking about the files, about the girl. But they're looking for her too. Her face is everywhere." Elias covered the speaker with his hand and looked at Riva. "Do you want to run again?" She looked up, surprised. "You don't want to get rid of me?" He smiled tiredly. "I never wanted to keep you. You stayed because you were hungry. You stayed because I didn't chase you. But now I think you stay because you trust me." She nodded slowly, then handed him both chips. "Send the second one too," she said. "Let them see not just what they did, but who they did it to." Elias hesitated. "Are you sure?" She whispered, "Yes." That night, Elias placed both chips into the beacon's receiver. He didn't hide anything. He uploaded it, all the data, the memory, the truth of the girl who was never meant to be known. When the process completed, the beacon's light blinked green. Message sent. And across the stars, 100 different people received the story of Riva, the experiment who lived, the child they couldn't silence. The next day, something strange happened. A small civilian drone arrived, white and silver with no weapons. It hovered above them and dropped a package, then flew away. Inside was a note, short, handwritten. "You are not alone. Keep her safe. More help coming." Elias handed Riva the folded paper. She held it tightly, like it was gold. For the first time she smiled, not a fake smile. Not one to hide fear, but a real one, full of warmth. "You were right," she said. "There are people who care." And Elias, sitting beside her in the wreck of everything he once owned, felt something growing again. Not fruit, not vines, not trees, but hope. This time, planted in something stronger than soil. This time, it was growing in hearts. Broadcast of the damned. The stars weren't just watching anymore. They were listening. Across hidden rebel channels, encrypted military servers, and forgotten outposts, the truth of Riva was spreading like wildfire, and someone, somewhere was terrified. Elias could feel the tension in the wind. They had exposed everything. And now, the world was reacting. That morning, 5 ships arrived above the sky. None of them bore the same symbol. Some had rebel colors, some had no markings at all. But none fired. Instead, one ship landed quietly, its doors opening to reveal a single figure. A human woman in armor, her helmet tucked under her arm. She walked toward Elias and Riva with her hands open. "I'm Captain Sura," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You don't know me, but your story is making waves across 20 systems. You've done something no one else dared." Elias stood between her and Riva, protective as ever. "What do you want?" he asked. The captain looked at Riva, then at the mangled ruins of the tower behind them. "I want the galaxy to hear her voice," she said. "She's more than a file, more than a project. She's proof." Riva stepped forward, trembling, but brave. "If I speak, they'll know where I am," she said. Captain Sura nodded. "They already do. But now the people know too, and some of them are ready to fight back." They took Riva aboard a small broadcast ship 1, built during the Resistance years. Old tech but secure. There, surrounded by rebel medics and technicians, she stood before a camera for the first time, her silver skin glowing under the lights, her voice steady despite the shaking in her hands. "My name is Riva," she said. "I was made in a lab, not born in a home. They called me a prototype, a mistake, a weapon, but I am a person, and I want the ones who did this to me to stop doing it to others." Her message was broadcast across the stars, to humans, aliens, outlaws, miners, station crews, and forgotten soldiers, people who had seen too much injustice, people who still remembered what it meant to protect the weak. Back on the surface, Elias stood alone in the dust, watching the signal tower blink green. The old garden was gone, but now he had grown something much bigger, a cause, a voice, a family. Hours later, the replies began. Hundreds of them. From colonies, refugee zones, hidden stations, even officers in the Galactic Assembly. They sent promises of safety, offers of asylum, and warnings of movement from the very ones who had built Riva. But not all were messages of hope. Some were threats. Ruthless voices demanding the girl's return, calling her stolen property. One message said simply, "Return the asset or we burn the system." Elias read it and said nothing. He went outside, sat on a broken crate, and cleaned his old plasma cutter. Riva joined him, her hand resting gently on his. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He shook his head. "Don't be. You gave them a reason to look up again." Captain Sura came with one last offer. "We can take her to a safer planet," she said. "Hidden, quiet, protected." But Elias looked at Riva, then back at the burning horizon. "No," he replied. "She belongs somewhere she can grow. She belongs where people can see her and choose what's right." Riva nodded, her voice clear. "I'm done hiding." That night, the stars weren't just distant lights anymore. They were doors, opening one by one. And behind each one, someone new was ready to stand up. A tree on new soil. Asterisk. The war never came. At least not the kind with guns and bombs. But something bigger happened. A shift, like soil breaking for the first time after winter. A quiet rebellion rooted in truth. Months had passed since Riva's broadcast, and now, Elias stood beneath a pale sky on a different world. It wasn't lush, it wasn't rich, but it had one thing he needed: space to plant something new. He dug the hole himself, old hands scraping red dust. Beside him, Riva held a seed wrapped in cloth, a mango seed. Not just any seed, one saved from the last tree that burned. The last piece of the garden that started it all. Elias placed the seed into the earth and covered it. Then he stepped back, letting Riva pour water over it. She knelt beside the spot and whispered something in her own language. Elias didn't ask what it meant, he just listened. They had been given a small home on this planet, a gift from rebel colonies who now protected them, and not just them. Other children had arrived too. Not stolen this time, not hidden in sheds or hunted in silence, but rescued, some with silver skin like Riva, others with strange eyes, extra limbs, or glowing veins. Each one different, each one afraid at first, and each one slowly learning to trust. Elias had never imagined his quiet life would become a shelter he still walked with. A limp, still missed his old porch and the smell of ripe mangoes. But now, his porch was filled with laughter. His garden was growing again, not just trees, but children and hope. Riva took charge of teaching the others. She spoke their languages, showed them how to build, read, speak kindly. She wore no uniforms, followed no orders, but the others listened to her like she was born to lead, because she had survived. Because she had spoken when no one else dared. One evening, Elias found her standing alone beside the small mango tree. It had grown 2 green leaves, reaching upward with stubborn life. She turned to him, her eyes full of quiet fire. "They tried to erase me," she said. "But now I've planted something they can't destroy." Elias nodded, tears in his eyes. "You didn't steal from me," he said. "You saved me." The stars above blinked gently, once distant and cold. They now felt close. Like everyone held a piece of the story. The story of a girl who stole a mango because she was starving, and of an old man who gave her food instead of fear. Together, they planted more than a seed. They planted a future, one that would stretch across worlds and begin, always with kindness.